three of you'd like, you could show up at our place about, 8:30 Christmas Eve and play till we go to sleep, and that'd be just right. I know you've been up and down a lot, but I'm going to ask that you would stand once more. Caleb has an affirmation of faith that I'd like you to join in together this morning. And I'd ask you to remain standing through the reading of the gospel and then be seated. We believe and proclaim that God saw us in our sin and sent His Son to save us. We believe and proclaim that Jesus was both God and man. We believe and proclaim that He entered the world as a sinless human. We believe and proclaim that salvation comes by faith in Christ alone. We believe that Jesus is our King, and we proclaim that we have chosen to follow wherever He may lead. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. You may be seated. A pastor's young daughter noticed that her father always paused and bowed his head for a moment before starting the sermon. So one day she asked him why. He said, "Well, honey," and he was proud that his daughter was so attentive to his messages. He said, "Well, I'm asking the Lord to help me preach a good sermon, especially during these weeks of Advent." And without hesitation, his daughter asked him, "Well, then why doesn't he?" Maybe we'd all better bow now for a moment. I like the affirmation of faith to say that we believe and proclaim and make that public statement. Because as we've seen and heard in these days, there are plenty of things that challenge that belief, that challenge our faith, even at this time of year. And God speaks, and He sparks within us at various times, and maybe surprising ways, a sense that we live underneath, we live within, and we live toward the eternal. We realize our life's journey is part of a much larger journey, which teaches that we'll never be at home until we find our true home in Him. This realization is captured through the text of the Magi, and it's captured in their hearts, and it's captured in their journey, beginning with a star. Many of you know that I married into a family whose patriarch goes by the moniker Star Guy. Nella Williams knows stars, knows the skies, knows all the things about them, hosts star parties, knows what events are about to come, and if he's ever at church, he'll be sure to tell you what's happening in the skies that week. My first prolonged encounter with Nello was a backpacking trip in the Bighorn Mountains, where every night there was a lesson about the skies and the stars. We had just met prior to him asking, and before we left, he had to ask Robin, now who is this again? What's his name? Didn't know the name of the guy dating his daughter, but he knew the name of the star that pointed to the star that pointed to the star. Tells you a lot about Nello. So for the past 27 years, I've been taught the skies. I've been instructed in the ways of the sky. Star Guy has coached me up on many a starry night, from the shadow of Devil's Tower to Indian Cara to Thorn Divide to Bell Knob Golf Course, all different events where he points out things to the sky. Also at our home in Seattle, sitting in our hot tub at night, looking up at the sky, to our back deck in St. Paul when we lived there. And by the way, he does know my name now, so that's progress. I find it all interesting, even fascinating, when Nello speaks of the skies. Yet for all that instruction, for all the lessons he's spoken to me, the truth is I could look up at the sky tonight and I could probably point out the same thing I could 27 years ago. That is the Big Dipper, if I can even find that. I'm not a star guy. The Magi were star guys. They knew the skies. We say and we sang just a little bit ago, we three kings, though we're not sure if there were 3 or 10 or 15 or more. We sing 3 because there were 3 gifts that are spoken of. We really don't know how many, though one of them was obviously named Nello. What we do know of the Magi is that they were seeking God long before they arrived at Bethlehem. 3 or 10 or 15 or however many there were, they were serious about seeking God. And so God initiated an encounter with them through what they knew. And I'm convinced today that in the same way, when that longing's revealed in our hearts, our desire for God, God will capture our attention through what we know, even if we don't know the skies. You might not be a star guy in the sense of Nello or of the Magi, but you do have an area where you are knowledgeable, where God speaks to you, where God uses you. And it's very possible that God will reveal himself to you in that area. Why? It's because that's where your focus lies. It's because that's where you're involved and invested. It's because that's where you know how to look. It's where you're fine-tuned to pay attention to what God is doing. It's in that area where God can make that star shine a little bit brighter in your life. And it's where God will lead and use your life to be effective in the lives of others. Think of how God uses that star in the Magi's lives. A lot of other stars up there, but they shun all of the other ones for the one star that God uses for the sake of the one. It reveals and it fuels the longing in their hearts, so that they leave everything. They leave family. They leave home. They journey roughly 1,000 miles to follow that star. And they travel, and they travel, and they travel. And when they arrive at Jerusalem, what do they proclaim? Do they say, "We're here. We're the guys. We've made it. We've traveled afar. We're pretty important guys"? No. They say, "Where is he? For we have followed his star." They proclaim, they pay witness, they give themselves to the purpose of the star in their lives. Think about the things that God uses in your life. Think about the thing that becomes the star that you pay attention to, that he places within you. so that it can most reveal Him, that it can lead you on a journey, take you on a journey seeking Him. It will be His star in your life that has you saying, "Where is He? Where is He? I want to follow that star so that I can proclaim His place in my life." It's not so that somebody can look at me and say, "Oh, isn't this person good at this? Doesn't he do a great job of that? Isn't she wonderful at this?" It has instead our lives pointing to Him, to who God is, and uses that in other people's lives. In Jeremiah 29:13, God tells us, "When you search for me, you will find me if you seek me with all your heart." That's the lesson of the Magi. That's the lesson for us in following the star that God gives us. It's in this larger sense of journey, of our life's journey, that a star leads us often in a series of smaller journeys. And it seems like at any time we're about either to begin a journey, or we're in the midst of a journey, or we're just about to conclude a journey. Sean and Miranda, we heard about, they're just at the beginning of a 9-pound, 13-ounce journey, a blessing of this boy that's brought into their life. And as he's brought into their life, little Nolan, they're facing some trials immediately. But they remember this and they seek God and the star in their lives that can point to Him. The semester journey for many students and teachers is about to end. And you can see the anticipation and the build-up and some of the stress and worry on their faces. It's at any place during one of our smaller journeys that our hearts can be gripped and stirred, sometimes by a deep restlessness, by God getting our attention. Sometimes it's called a holy discontent that God might use to stir our lives and create a longing for the larger, the real, the lasting, so that the birth of a child can reveal God. The end of a semester can point to the promise that all trials have an ending. It's a message that gripped the Magi and what can grab our hearts as well. Back in the fall of 1989, I remember Robin and I being together, and we were seriously dating at that time. And we were in the park one night, sitting in the swings, talking underneath a huge sky. I didn't know what the stars were named, but I knew they were beautiful. And I knew, I could sense that I was about to begin a journey. I was compelled to give this beautiful young woman my heart. First and only woman I've loved in my life. And in the midst of the joy and elation and all the giddiness that you feel, my heart was suddenly overwhelmed unexpectedly by another sense that even if we live a long life together, someday, by death, we will part. And I'm not sure why I had that sense at such a time. But I thought, and I was brought to the realization that as great as a relationship could be, there would be pain and there would be loss. And I remember thinking and even asking God, well then, should we then love? Should we even enter into a relationship knowing that there will be pain? And I know now that God was showing me that for all of us, our earthly journey is swallowed up by the larger eternal journey. And we sometimes forget that. That we live not just this life, but we live within and toward the eternal kind of life. So that the star led the Magi to Bethlehem, to Him whose birth the angels sang. It led them to the place where the child was. It led them to a house. It led them home. It's where all of our journeys, beginning, middle, end, all of our smaller journeys are leading toward the place that we can call forever and ever and ever. home. And on the way, that place in your life where you are the star guy, where God gives you insight, pay attention. Pay attention. Because I truly believe God's calling you to shine brightly in the lives of others, regardless of circumstance. To others who will be attracted by your journey in a way that God will use you to minister to them. All of Jerusalem, it says, was disturbed by the news, by the journey of the Magi. It got their attention. It awoke them to possibility. For Herod, it awoke him to jealousy and fear, because he didn't know what this would mean for him as a leader. But for others, it may have entered hope into their lives. Your journey fits into the eternal. And it's meant to impact the journey of others. It's meant to speak into the pain that others are feeling and to bring comfort to them. The pain like that of a young basketball player I know who's been living at a friend's house for over 2 weeks now. Because as he told me, it's easier for my mom if I'm not around. And I say to myself, where is home for this young man? Or to the young woman who's back from her first semester of college, who was away from the dysfunction of her family, yet not sure how to function apart from it. She's being swallowed up by the sense of being alone on a big campus. How does our star speak to her about the power and presence of God in her life? To many of the families that we spoke of and prayed for this morning, the uncertainty of life and of disease and perhaps of untimely death. How does our star inspire them somehow with the power of God's eternal love? I know that there lies within our hearts this morning a stirring, sometimes a holy discontent that moves in us. And it comes to us in the face of gain as well as in loss, in joy and in sorrow, as we embark on a journey or when we get close to the end. There's a star that's meant to capture our attention this morning. Do you see it? A star that's visible to us through something we know, yet shining more brightly than anything around it. Do you see it? A star that can reveal to us purpose in pain, cause us to risk position, cause us to get out of our comfort zone, cause us to bow down in surrender and in worship. It's a star that leads us home. Where's your star this morning? Where is it leading you? Do you see it? Would you bow your heads, please? Dear God, we thank you this morning for the journey of the Magi who left home, who were guided by your leading to follow a star. God, this morning, I believe you are moving in our lives and our hearts. You're speaking to us, showing us a way, big or small, where you would have us move, where you would have us follow, for the sake of our own lives and future, for where we fit into your eternal plan, as well as for the sake of those whose lives we are called to impact.